The pristine white cardstock card, adorned with calligraphy, sat neatly aligned at the place setting between the crystal water glass and bread plate. In its intended space for my name, it bore the words "Idiot Trash." 2 words, beautifully scripted, as if thoughtfully penned. I stood frozen for approximately 4 seconds before the meaning became clear. The room continued to fill with people claiming their seats in the Cascade Room of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel in downtown Seattle. The gold light from chandeliers bathing a total of $40,000 worth of floral displays, while a string quartet in the corner played an unrecognizable classical piece. Claudine was 3 seats away, already enjoying her boss Renata's jokes, oblivious to my sudden stillness. I lifted the card, scrutinized it between my fingers, read it once more. "Idiot Trash!" And then Renata glanced over. Renata Hale, head of the acclaimed mid-sized PR firm Hale Meridian Communications in the Pacific Northwest's esteemed circle, a figure my spouse spoke of with the same awe typically reserved for spiritual icons. Renata scrutinized the card I offered, and she chuckled heartily. Not a hushed, awkward laugh, but a genuine, joyous one that causes onlookers to wonder what they've missed. I am Sterling Marsh, a 48-year-old man from Tacoma. My upbringing was humble, with my father holding down 2 jobs and my mother managing the books for 3 small businesses within our kitchen nook. At age 26, I founded my first company using a personal loan of $40,000 and a second-hand laptop, eventually selling it 11 years later for an amount beyond my lifetime's worth of expenditure. Today, unbeknownst to those at the table, I was the hidden majority shareholder of a modest media and communications conglomerate called Trident Pacific Group, which in fact was Hale Meridian Communications' sole largest client. I gently placed the card on the table, drew out my chair, took a seat, filled a glass with water, and smiled at Renata Hale as if nothing had occurred since I hadn't yet decided on my next move. However, I was confident, with the measured conviction of one who has made decisions for 22 years that carried real financial weight, that whatever action I took would not be hasty. The evening was still long. First, let me explain how I ended up in that room and how someone can spend 16 long years married without truly knowing their partner, even amidst a crowd they're trying to impress. My encounter with Claudine began at a charity event for a children's literacy organization held at the Seattle Art Museum in 2009. She was 31 and worked in corporate communications for a mid-sized biotech firm based in South Lake Union. Her sharpness and composure, along with her intriguing question about arts funding that left me momentarily speechless, were unlike anything I'd experienced at such events. Before the cocktail hour ended, I requested her number. We dated for 2 years. I was cautious. I didn't distrust her, but I had realized, while growing and selling a business, that the costliest errors stem from hasty decisions. Observing her behavior towards those who offered no advantage, her handling of disputes, and her discussions about family, coworkers, and past experiences, I noticed nothing amiss. She was considerate to waitstaff, straightforward when disagreeing, genuinely called her mother on Sundays, and we exchanged vows in 2011 at a modest Cascade ceremony with only 26 attendees, no one donning clothes they'd be uncomfortable sweating in. For the initial years, our marriage mirrored well-constructed structures, unexciting, unremarkable, just well-built. Claudine transitioned into communications consulting and eventually joined Hale Meridian 6 years ago, a role that fit her competencies. She excelled at it. She arrived home with renewed vigor unlike her time at the biotech firm, and I was pleased by this change. What initially escaped my attention was how she started moderating herself around me as Hale Meridian took central stage in her professional life. Discussions about work transformed from straightforward updates to staged presentations. Frequently, the name Renata Hale echoed through our household with an aura of respect that evolved from professional regard to something else. It was no longer just admiration for Renata, it felt more like idolization. Renata offered her opinions. Renata had thoughts on this matter. Renata's methods in client handling. Renata's views on communication tactics. Over and over again, it was all about Renata. I'm not a possessive man. I've never been the type who craves to be the most remarkable in social settings. I had spent enough years being the least remarkable person that the appeal of such competition waned, so I didn't view this as a threat initially. After about 2 years, I noticed Claudine portrayed me differently depending on who she was speaking to. To her family and our old friends, I was a man of distinction, her husband, the founder of a business and an investor, a reserved individual, not ostentatious, proficient with finances. However, to Renata and in professional circles, I seemed somewhat awkward. I didn't realize this immediately, but I did come to understand it. It was evident in her slight pauses before responding when someone at a work event asked about my occupation. It was manifested in her concise, yet deflating summaries of my career. He's more or less semi-retired. He dabbles in investments. He keeps himself occupied as if the aim was to leave no mark whatsoever. I kept these observations private and cataloged them diligently, just like everything else. If any aspect of this rings a bell for you, keep reading. And before we proceed, please let me know in the comments from where you're watching. I read all comments. Now let's carry on with our discussion. Yearly, Renata orchestrated the Hail Meridian Annual Gala, an event renowned by April at Seattle's historic Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Since 1924, this establishment has played host to significant city events, a fact it is well aware of. The Cascade Room, seating 300 when fully set, was always arranged by Renata for the occasion. Tables for 10, fresh flowers in theme-coordinated colors, a served dinner, program, speeches, awards, an entire production. This year's theme, partnerships that endure, ironically foreshadowed events to come. Claudine had been meticulously planning her attendance for months. She tried on 3 different navy dresses with structured bodices at Nordstrom on Pine Street before making a decision. On the day of the gala, she styled her hair. Every outward indication suggested she was preparing for an event that held more importance to her than she openly admitted. I inquired from her the previous week whether she had shared much about me with her colleagues. "What do you imply?" she questioned. We were in our Laurelhurst home, situated on the eastern side with slightly expansive lots and a partial view of Lake Washington from the upper floor. "Exactly as I inquired," I replied. "Is Renata aware of my profession? Have you discussed my past often?" She displayed a look I had become accustomed to, a blend of subtle irritation and tactful reserve. "I've brought it up occasionally," she said. "It rarely arises. It pertains to a work affair, sterling, not a sharing session." I acknowledged with a nod, choosing not to probe further, but I registered the tone of her response. The ballroom was bustling when we arrived. In the gathering, I recognized merely 4 individuals. Patricia Stokes, a woman from a regional hospital system who manages communications and whom I'd met briefly at a downtown conference, and 3 Trident Pacific clients present as Hail Meridian representatives, some of whom vaguely recognized me. Claudine, as usual in professional scenarios, moved with efficiency, composure, and a slight lead. She located her table, scanned the place cards, offered a cool, guiding smile towards me, indicating the seat next to hers. I moved to my designated spot, picked up the card, and saw the words, "Idiot Trash." In just 4 seconds, understanding didn't strike as a sudden shock but crept in slowly, chillingly, like a temperature drop before a storm rather than during it. I wish to be truthful about the emotions that coursed through me in those 4 seconds, for I believe it holds significance. At age 25, I might have experienced pain or anger. Instead, what I felt was more like acknowledgement, similar to when an assumption you've held privately for a long time is validated by tangible proof. It's not pleasure. It's not ease. It's closer to the sensation after years of ambiguous symptoms when you finally receive a diagnosis. At least now I understand what I'm grappling with. I took a seat. Renata Hale occupied the head of the table, which was her table, the premium table at this gathering, the one where partners, senior staff, and their spouses were seated. She was 62, with silver hair, dressed in burgundy, embodying the poise that comes from 4 decades of anticipation and fulfillment. She had looked at the card in my hand and chuckled. To her left was a stranger named Garrett, her head of strategy. Opposite me sat Devin, handling media relations, and beside her was Philip, Claudine's immediate superior, a man who appeared to mimic Renata's emotional states consistently. 5 other individuals filled the table, their names unveiled as the night progressed. They were colleagues, a junior partner, someone's spouse who seemed equally uncomfortable except without my hidden burden. Claudine fell silent upon seeing me arrive. She was aware of my presence. She didn't speak. Instead, she studied her menu. Renata composed herself and slightly tilted her head towards me, revealing an expression that hinted at both amusement and assessment. "Sterling," she queried, "Claudine has spoken highly of you." "Has she?" I responded. "She claims you're retired." "Partly retired," I corrected, the same term Claudine often used. I observed Renata's countenance as I spoke. She didn't attempt to conceal her slight lowering of estimation. In a subtle manner, the way Claudine subtly shifted her perception towards me upon hearing the word retired became evident. "Savor it while you can," she said, addressing Garrett instead. Over the following 90 minutes, I find myself meticulously recounting this segment of the evening due to an event that wasn't sensational in a Hollywood-style conflict sense. Instead, it was captivating beyond that. It was one of those evenings where you immerse yourself in your own quietness and observe everything keenly, and what unfolds before you cannot be unremembered later. For the initial hour, Claudine avoided making direct eye contact with me. She erupted in hearty laughter at Renata's anecdotes. Her comments were strategically inserted into our dinner conversation at opportune moments, as if she had been to enough of these gatherings to know precisely when to speak to gain attention without seeming overtly ambitious. She was putting on a show, not in the manner people perform when they're lying, but rather performing to mask her own thoughts and feelings. In the manner that people unconsciously compartmentalize their behavior when occupying different rooms, maintaining the separation effortlessly after repetition. I consumed my meal. I showed courtesy towards all present at the table. I inquired about a media campaign mentioned in the Puget Sound Business Journal from Devon, which seemed to bring her satisfaction. I queried Garrett regarding an update within Pacific Northwest Infrastructure Communications that Trident Pacific had been tracking privately, and the project name I mentioned caused him to lean forward slightly. However, I didn't clarify my intentions. I simply asked questions, listened to responses, and let the event unfold naturally. The place card remained folded beside the bread plate undisturbed. No one had shifted it. Philip cast a glance at it during the soup course but remained silent. One of the junior associates fixed their gaze on it, clearly exerting effort not to react. At the quarter past the hour, Claudine glanced my way. Her gaze was measured, scrutinizing. She seemed to be sizing me up, trying to ascertain if I was troubled, if I was gearing up for something, if she needed to intervene in some impending situation. I returned her gaze with a steady, focused smile, similar to the one I offer clients during our third round of negotiations. It was calm, attentive, concealing nothing. She looked away first. The event commenced following the clearing of the dinnerware. Renata stood at the podium up front and delivered remarks about the firm's year, its clients, emphasizing the theme of enduring partnerships. She was an accomplished public speaker, composed, empathetic where necessary, commanding everywhere else. It was evident why Claudine respected her. I could also see quite distinctly that Renata Hale was a person who had spent decades at the heart of rooms like this one, and had come to assume, without question, that her judgments of people were unwaveringly accurate. One, she cited various clients, among them prominent ones. Trident Pacific wasn't explicitly named, a subtle irony as it doesn't reveal its clientele. Renata was unaware of the company's proprietorship. This arrangement was deliberate. I pondered the card at my seat, reflecting on it. I considered the fact that someone at our table of 10 had intentionally seated a man with a card labeling him as idiot trash, well in advance with careful calligraphy. It wasn't hastily scribbled, but meticulously written, folded, and placed. The revelation of this brought laughter from the person who managed the firm. I contemplated what it suggested about what Claudine had shared with them. Not the exact phrases, but the overall picture that intrigues me. I'm not concerned with the specific words. What I'm interested in is the story they depict. In this setting, Claudine had been painting a portrait of Sterling Marsh that made certain words on a calligraphed card seem plausible, even amusing. I found myself contemplating my father, who worked the early shift at a Tacoma paper mill and would return home smelling of chemicals and exertion. He once shared with me his view that the most hazardous act one could allow someone was to determine one's identity before they entered a room. I also pondered the current workforce of 43 individuals at Trident Pacific, as well as the 3-year contract with Hale Meridian, renewable yearly and accounting for about 31% of the company's income. However, when the program concluded, the atmosphere transitioned to the cocktail segment of the evening, prompting me to leave the table and head towards the bar. Here I pause, as I imagine some readers might be wondering, why didn't he depart instead? Why endure dinner or the performance? Why not leave as soon as you spotted the agenda? However, my response remains consistent in every boardroom when someone attempted to use uncertainty against me. You don't act according to their rhythm, you act on yours. I wasn't there for drama. A spectacle would have entertained for approximately 40 seconds before becoming the topic of conversation, making me the husband who caused a disturbance at the Hale Meridian Gala. Such a narrative would have served some individuals, but not myself. What I sought was a private dialogue with the one in control of this firm, and I desired that talk to take place when feelings were replaced by understanding. The bar was strategically positioned on the southern side of the room, adjacent to the large windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. On an April evening, the city echoed Seattle's unique charm, neither fully raining nor dry, carrying the aroma of the Sound and lingering cherry blossoms from the 4 trees I passed along University Street. I secured a bourbon at the bar and stood near the edge. Within 10 minutes, Renata Hale, president of Hale Meridian, graced the bar, still radiant from her speech, receiving congratulations as she navigated the room. Approaching me while the bartender completed her drink, she said, "Sterling," with a pleasant tone. "Are you enjoying the evening?" I responded positively. "You've organized a stunning event." She smiled, acknowledging 30 years of expertise. "I hope the dinner was to your satisfaction." I nodded in agreement. Pausing and slightly turning towards her, I said, "Renata, I would appreciate a brief conversation with you tonight if you have some time. Not here, somewhere quieter." She appraised me thoughtfully, her gaze suggesting a lifetime of discerning individuals in rooms. A subtle shift in her demeanor hinted at heightened awareness. "Indeed," she replied, pausing briefly. "The quieter library lounge on the mezzanine, perhaps?" The Fairmont Olympics Mezzanine Lounge is a space designed for meaningful discussions. Rich wood adornments, subdued lighting, plush leather chairs, the murmur of the main activity 1 floor below serving as background noise. We settled into chairs, facing each other near the window. A server approached, and I assured him we were good. Renata crossed her legs and gazed at me with the calm assurance of a crisis negotiator with 3 decades under her belt. "What's been on your mind?" I took out 2 items from my inner jacket pocket and placed them on the small table between us. One item was the place card, which I realized now was worthless. I surreptitiously took the card during the cocktail hour without drawing attention to myself. The card wasn't my personal ID, as I rarely use those. Instead, it was a Trident Pacific Group institutional card displaying the company name and my title, Sterling Marsh, Majority Principal. Renata glanced at both items on the table. After a prolonged silence, I spoke up. "I value honesty," I said, "and I believe you do too. So let me be frank about the situation." I shared with her what I'd witnessed. I explained the sequence of events at that table. I conveyed my interpretation of the portrait Claudine had been painting, which, in their understanding, portrayed who Sterling Marsh was. I maintained a calm tone throughout. I avoided using language I might later regret. I stated each fact only once and made sure to express myself clearly. I took the Trident Pacific card and displayed it towards her. "Trident Pacific has maintained its Hale Meridian agreement for 3 years, I stated. "This accounts for roughly 30% of your overall earnings, as per your company's latest annual report. I'm a major undisclosed shareholder of Trident Pacific. I have been since the company was established. This is unknown to Claudine and to your firm, as I deliberately structured my involvement in this manner. I have no intention nor interest in employing my financial standing for social influence, and I wish to make it unequivocally clear that what I'm about to share with you has no connection to the Hale Meridian contract." Renata did not exhibit the response I anticipated. There was no dramatic display of shock. Instead, she listened intently, her whole body focused. "I'm informing you of this," I continued, "to ensure that you have access to accurate data for your decision-making process." Renata's expression remained unchanged, a sign of attentive listening. "At your event tonight, you found my name card labeled as idiot trash, causing you to laugh. I believe you are intelligent enough to comprehend why this is important information for you." Immediately, I placed the business card on the table and moved it towards you. I declared that I was severing my personal connections to this event and this specific table, stating that I would not be attending future Hale Meridian functions as Claudine's guest. This decision is personal and does not affect the Trident Pacific relationship, which will still be managed at a corporate level without my participation in the social aspect. I rose from my seat. "I consider you an accomplished executive," I remarked, "and I see the authenticity of your creation, yet I advise you to ponder over the environment that justifies such a display on a place card. That environment originates from somewhere." I fastened my jacket. "Enjoy your evening, Renata." Exiting the mezzanine lounge, I descended the main staircase past the marble pillars in the lobby, exited through University Street doors, and stepped into the April breeze. Arriving home at Laurelhurst, I settled in the kitchen with a glass of water and my phone positioned face down on the table, remaining idle for roughly 40 minutes. Claudine arrived at 11:37 p.m. I've been aware of this since I was keeping an eye on the clock when you're unsure about what you're anticipating, but you sense that you are waiting. Upon entering, she stopped when she saw me in the kitchen. "You left early," she said. She placed her bag on the counter, keeping her coat on. "What transpired? Where did you disappear to?" I glanced up, only to find you absent. "I had a necessary discussion," I replied. Later, I returned home. She studied me for a spell. I could see her piecing together the puzzle in real time, my countenance, the unbroken stillness, my attire, and the fact that it was midnight and I was seated at the kitchen table. "With whom?" she inquired. "Renata," I disclosed. The name shifted the room's temperature. "Regarding what?" Her tone became cautious. The act was concluded. This was her genuine voice, the private voice, the one I had been married to for 16 years. "The place card," I explained. She remained silent. Her jaw moved subtly, as if she were selecting words. "Claudine," I added, "I won't inquire about who placed it there, nor will I ask what you've been telling colleagues at that firm about me. I believe I have a sufficient idea of the outline to comprehend it." Her query was about something else. Her gaze met mine. "Is this your true self when I'm not around?" The question lingered in the kitchen. Outside, the lake performed its April act, audible but unseen, a sensation rather than a visible presence. She began to cry genuine tears, those that precede words, originating from the chest and surfacing involuntarily. I recognized it because we had been married for 16 years, and in that time you learn the differences. "I can't comprehend how it turned into this," she said. "I don't. Renata has a knack for. It's been years, sterling, of feeling like my true self doesn't align with their admiration. And I think I started agreeing with their opinions instead of challenging them. I stopped upsetting you, and then I began to echo those sentiments myself." I nodded slowly. "What kind of opinions?" She wiped her face. "That you were uninterested. You failed to comprehend my actions. I had once labeled you as simple, a remark that was met with laughter and no interference from me. Yet it wasn't an insult like idiot, but rather a devaluation of something genuine in pursuit of approval, a trade-off between the truth and the acceptance of people I wanted to impress. This is what I needed to grasp," I stated. "I aim for honesty regarding what followed, as this isn't a tale of a tidy conclusion. True events don't conclude neatly. They linger, or they don't conclude at all, or they end and then resurface in different guises, and none of that makes them straightforward." Claudine and I engaged in prolonged, challenging honesty for 3 weeks, where neither of us feigned nor competed. An image unfolded of a marriage subtly veering towards an unspoken direction, her yearning for validation in a world that prizes specific achievements, and my tendency to remain silent over issues that proved costly, equating silence with tranquility. We sought the guidance of a counselor, Dr. Anastasia Reeves, based in Eastlake, who maintained an uncanny ability to remain unfazed by our self-descriptions. We're still attending sessions. "I won't assure you that all problems have been resolved. Neither will I claim Claudine and I have surmounted this hurdle. What I will disclose is that the truth surfaced, a crucial step for any genuine progress, and that the truth emerged due to 2 calligraphed words on a white card, and because I opted to endure an entire dinner before deciding my course of action regarding Renata Hale. She reached out to me 2 days post the gala, not exactly to apologize. Renata Hale's apology didn't seem adequate given the circumstance, but she reached out to express regret and acknowledge the personal and professional implications of our conversation. She confessed that her laughing response at the table was a mere social reflex she wasn't proud of. I appreciated the call and assured her the Trident Pacific relationship would remain as is, with no alterations in our working dynamics. I kept my word, maintaining the status quo. I also advised her to ponder on the event, considering it unusual for a table of 10 well-educated communications specialists to find such a place card acceptable. This wasn't due to malice, but rather an aspect she should reflect on. It wasn't malicious intent that drove them, but rather a more prevalent behavior in crowded spaces filled with those who value status. They tended to belittle those without obvious status. "Your role," I stated, "is to help people present themselves authentically. That's a challenging task when your own circle is making assumptions." After a brief pause, she conceded, "That's reasonable. 3 months have elapsed since the Fairmont Olympic incident. I've returned to that hotel on 2 occasions, once for a business breakfast in the Georgian Room, and another time for a meeting with a CEO who prefers the lobby bar. Each time, I walked past the hallway leading to the Cascade room, recalling a folded white card bearing calligraphy. What lingers isn't so much the humiliation itself. It faded promptly. Instead, what remains is. For many, the swift passage of time follows a corporate collapse, the disappointment of 200 investors, and the public humiliation of a business failure documented in local media. Resilience develops. What continually lingers is the query it provoked, not the one about Claudine's affection for me, which I firmly believe she felt and continues to feel despite its complexities. The question that surfaced was the one posed to her in the kitchen that evening. Are you this person when I'm not around? Since this is the essential query, not just within marriage, but also in business, hiring decisions, client selections, and conversations about someone once they've exited the room. The true self emerges when no one who knows you is watching. All else is posturing. This wisdom was instilled in me by my father, though he never uttered it with words. He demonstrated it by consistently being the same person, at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday in Tacoma, during every family dinner on Sunday, and in each conversation I ever eavesdropped upon. There was no alternate persona. He never found such a version necessary. Over time, I ponder about the financial toll of adopting various identities in different settings. This expense gradually accumulates subtly, eating away at the original self. Eventually, you may gaze into the mirror and perceive that the character you've portrayed for so long has become hazy. It appears to me that Claudine is contemplating this matter as well. I notice her pondering. If it was the calligraphed words on a white card at the Fairmont Olympic table that eventually made us both confront what we had neglected, then those seemingly unattractive words served their purpose. The place card now resides in my desk drawer, not in the top one and hidden from plain sight. The second drawer houses an infrequently used folder of documents. I keep it as a reminder of lessons learned, not for frequent perusal or to fuel anger. Instead, some items should be preserved in their original state, rather than recast into a more palatable narrative. Labeled Idiot Trash, written in calligraphy, the piece hails from the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, Seattle, Washington, April. The room's quietest individuals often possess the most knowledge of its happenings, and they decide when to contribute their insights. Sterling's story stays with me not due to a place card, but because of the dinner. Despite bearing something that could provoke many to overturn tables, he remained composed, smiling, asking questions, consuming his meal. Such self-control isn't a sign of coldness. It's a testament to a man who understands himself and doesn't rely on others for validation. I believe this is the core message. Those who humiliate you are banking on your response. They've penned that specific narrative segment, but Sterling declined the character they assigned him. If one deeply understands their value, there's no need to validate it instantaneously. One decides when to showcase it. Such a choice isn't indicative of weakness. Instead, it represents the most potent act an individual can perform.